Alright, part 2. So, what we got here is the final section. I'll cut to when I get up there. First you have to squeeze out of that thing. Then you have to do this over 400 stud wraparound. And no, it's not a wall hop. Then after you did that, I built this entire jank gameplay section. And I'd personally say it's above Supreme, but I'll just say it's Supreme. Alright, so this is it. First, you'd have to flick yourself off this once you get stuck inside it. You'd have to go through this tiny wall. You would lodge here after you grabbed onto that ledge thing. Then you'd stuck yourself in here, blah, blah. Then you'd wall hop on that. You'd get to this section. You'd go through all this. You'd land on this. And then we got this part where it's actually tiny lodges, which would, then you'd be able to get up onto this, lodge inside. Then you're in here. Then you go up to here. Then we're at this section, one of my favorite sections. Then we got the ladder truss flick. We got this part. And then we got this, another thing. And then we got all this. You would go through that, jump over that thing that kills you, and then lodge and all that stuff. Blah, blah, blah. Then you'd go through this. That red killbrick kills you. Then you'd go through all this. All these are tiny wall hops on this little ice thing. Then you'd grab onto these trusses, go into this vine, and do this sick thing that I made where you go through that little hole and then you end up on that truss if you do this little flick thing. Then you get to one of the final parts where you climb this really hard thing using flicks and stuff. Then we got the final flick and it gets you up to here. Then you use this ladder and this one thing that I made to flick yourself directly up, and then you get teleported to the next section, the true finale. I haven't built it yet, but I'll see you in part 3.